again, like we always do, instead of looking at just an opinion or wishful thinking or what some people on the internet might say, let's look at actual facts. And there's an opinion from one of the automotive publications, actually a financial publication, that says used cars are never going to get any cheaper, right? So that by itself is an opinion. But how did they come to that conclusion, and does it make sense? The biggest problem is that there were millions of cars that were not built over the course of 2 years, right? So from 2020 and 21, there was a very significant reduction in the manufacturing of new cars, right? And what happened is the used car factory is really a function of what new cars were sold 2 or 3 years earlier. So if you take 2023, 24, and 25, you go back 2 or 3 years. Now you're talking 2020, 21, and 22. During those 3 years, there were millions and millions of cars that were not built because of pandemic, because of supply chain, because of the new car market being slow. Going off the cliff. Cars that would come into the marketplace for 2 or 3 year old cars in 2024 or 25. And then even in the later part of this decade, 5 or 6 or 7 year old cars, they were never built. And they're kind of still not being built. The manufacturing pace is a lot slower. Auto factories have figured out that it's almost better to build less cars and sell them for more money. Where in the past, if you were a dealer and you sold 300 or 400 cars and made a couple $100 a car, you made X amount of dollars. But if you sell 100 cars and make $1,000 a car, you end up making the same amount of gross profit, and you have less advertising, less sales commission, less floor plan for your inventory. The factories figured out the same thing. So used car prices are not going to go down. They were a little bit of a spike at the beginning of this year, and they've kind of leveled off, but only because of supply and demand, they're not really going to be affected. What about in the automotive business? What about repairs? Well, car repairs are getting more expensive. It talks about hybrids and EVs being part of the problem, and that is part of the problem, but a lot of it has to do with the technology. Um, Vehicles that were manufactured over the past 5 or 6 years were highly advanced in terms of the technology that went into them. Used to be in the old days, if you had a problem with the car, you could bring it to a mechanic and they can adjust a carburetor. They could, adjust belts. You could adjust physical mechanical items. Now, most of the repairs or faults or problems with a vehicle have to do with technology, has to do with a computer, a chip, something that a mechanic, you can't fix with a wrench. You have to plug it into a specialized tool. And what happens is those diagnostic computers are at the new car dealerships. Those OBD2 sensors, ODB, onboard diagnostic, um, works on more standard cars. They spit out your fault codes. But more advanced vehicles need very specialized computers. So if you have, let's say, a 2021 Toyota, the computers in that Toyota have to be read with advanced Toyota computers. Joe Schmo, the garage around the corner, is probably not going to have that computer. And that means that you have to bring it to the dealership. The dealership's going to have a higher labor rate. They're going to have a higher cost of parts. And because of the fact you don't have the same supply of repairs, you can't bring it to any, independent garage. There's going to be less competition for the cost of fixing that car. Speaking of Toyota, Toyota has announced that they have a new battery technology for EVs that will go 740 miles and 10 minutes charging. That's a deal. That's a game changer, right? Yeah, it says right here, game changer. What it does is it makes EVs more compatible with gasoline vehicles, where you can drive a long range. Look, 700 miles, 745 miles is longer than the range on most gasoline cars. Most gasoline cars, if you have a 20-gallon tank, even 25 mpg, that's 500 miles. Some cars get higher mpg, but they have smaller gas tanks. So if you have a 30 mpg car and you have a 17 500 mile range, E2 or 300 range, but that wasn't the big problem. The big problem is it takes a long time to recharge them. So what happens is it's not competitive with gasoline. When you have a 700-mile range and 10-minute charging, now there's really no reason not to have an EV. And that's what they're going for, whether you want one or not. Now, let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence, in the automotive industry. And we want to hear what you think about this. There's some companies that are introducing AI software for dealerships that help dealerships deal with customers. Here is a sample, Real AI by Impel. Impel is this company. And here's a sample chat. What's the difference between Sorento LX and EX? That's a customer chat. And AI replies back the answer. What's the difference in price? AI replies back the answer. So this dealership software is rolling out a chat bot that's designed for dealers to talk to customers. So is that more preferred for you to talk to a chat bot than talking to the actual dealer? As a consumer, as a customer, which one do you think is better? Would you rather have a conversation with an actual person, or just don't like talking to the dealership people and you want to talk to a chatbot? Chatbot is having one of the chatbots, you copyright and privacy violations. Here's the thing about AI that a lot of people are not recognizing. AI or ChatGPT and AI takes information from public information. Like it scrapes the web and reads websites and reads PDF files and reads brochures to get the information to give back answers. Well, the argument being made is that's copyrighted information. And if it's using them, even if it's restating them, editing them, and formatting the text into different words, it's still pulling the information from copyrighted data. So the question is that allowable? And that's going to be a big thing that will affect the AI usage in commercial entities. Where else is AI affecting the automotive industry? Well, here's a good example. They're using artificial intelligence to predict battery health. This is one of the most important factors of a used electric vehicle is the battery health. You have to check the battery to make sure that it still has life left in it. If you buy a used electric vehicle and the battery's worn out, you're going to find that it's not going to be worth any money, right? How does it do it? It uses all this algorithmic calculation of chemicals and formulas within the battery. This is all very advanced methods: voltage method, Kalman filter, estimated internal states of a dynamic system, battery's state of charge. It's very advanced, and normally it would require a lot of computing power, but AI can do this a lot easier. So this is something that is being rolled out to help people understand what is the remaining life of a battery. Here's something that may benefit the auto market. I can't think of any downside to using AI to predict if a battery is going to continue to work in that vehicle. Last crossover between automotive industry and another subject we talk about quite a bit, which is real estate. So over the last couple years, there have been spikes up and down with gasoline prices. Gas prices in some places went from a couple dollars a gallon to $5 a gallon, more than double. And even in the face of that increase, gasoline consumption didn't really go down that much. It went down a little bit, but it was mostly discretionary trips. You maybe didn't take a longer vacation. Maybe you didn't do that extra trip to the store. But gasoline usage stayed about the same. Why is that? Well, if you need to drive, you need to drive. Whatever the price of gas is, you have to pay it. You can complain about it, and maybe you take it away from other discretionary purchases. You may reduce the amount of times you go to Starbucks and get a coffee. You may not buy a new shirt every week, whatever the case is, but you need to drive, right? You can't spend less money on you can't buy less gallons of gas if you have to get certain places. How does that relate to real estate? Well, that's what one thing that people don't understand about real estate is you need to live somewhere. If the price goes up and the interest rate goes up, it's not going to be, well, less people need to buy a house. I'm not buying a house because it costs more money. People are finding a way. That's why the price of single family real estate is still going up or staying the same in the face of interest rates going up. It will have some effect at the margins, but use that automobile gas analogy to remember that just because supply and demand works in an elastic system when it's a discretionary item. If the price of something that you don't need to have every day, the price of beer goes up, right? Maybe don't buy as much beer because you don't have to have that, but you need a place to live. You need gas for your car. If the price goes up, it'll be a struggle. You'll pull from other areas. Some of the fringe areas are like how often that somebody gets their nails done or how often maybe they go out to eat. Those things will shrink with inflation. But the inflation from core items will affect those. Even if the price of going out to eat does not go up, the price of gas going up, the price of rent going up will affect the other things. It won't affect those core things because people have to have a roof over their head. You have to get the places with your car. You have to eat, get the grocery store. So that's a good way to see the analogy for why real estate is not going